During the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, various operations went not according to plan. Yet there were two operations that appear to have worked according to plan, but they were often missed or not discussed. Namely, the disruption of the strategic communication system and the air defense system. This of course raises the question, what happened and how did the Ukrainian armed forces deal with it? To answer this question, we have as a guest an expert on cyber conflicts, the grugq. Can you give us a short introduction about you, please?
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved in information security, cybersecurity since 1999. In that time, I have worked at a large number of places, startups, large companies. For the last decade or so, most of what I do is research on cyber conflict, warfare, disinformation, things like that, particularly between states, but also non-state actors when they're involved. So for example, now with the Ukraine war, I've been spending a lot of time speaking to people, some sort of in Europe and in security organizations there, in Ukraine, in the US, all of these places that basically have people who are directly involved, who have an idea of what's going on or have opinions. And I'm just sort of collecting and analyzing all of that. And I think that gives me something of a unique view on cyber warfare as we experience it right now.
You pointed out in your video on the dynamics of Russian cyber war that Russia conducted two major operations in the beginning that seemed to achieve both their goals. And this was in the early days of the invasion of Ukraine 2022. So can you briefly tell us what happened?
Right. So the opening phase of the war, that sort of the February 24, they had two objectives. This is purely on the cyber side. One of them was a sort of decapitation strike, but they wanted to remove the leadership of the army, the government, and so on. They wanted to get them isolated and separated from, the people on the ground, just regular citizens. So they wanted to do this sort of virtual decapitation strike. They also wanted to make sure that the air defense systems, like the air denial systems, were not functioning. So that was in conjunction with a lot of missile attacks against installations and radars and things like that. So these were the sort of the two thrusts. So firstly, they had this attack against Viasat, which was basically, so the Viasat satellite provided the backbone for all of the Ukrainian military comms. Like it was their backup. That's how the generals would speak to people in other places. Like that was it. And so when that was taken out, they were basically unable to communicate from their headquarters to just the various different regional things, particularly in the field. So that was actually a major blow. It turned out not to be particularly relevant due to the force structure of the Ukrainian army. But the other one that they did, this sort of attacks where they wiped out all of these systems that were used to control the air defense networks. That was much more effective in terms of its actual tactical value. And you saw that with, like, they were able to send helicopters to Hostomel Airport, which is right next to Kyiv. It shouldn't be possible to fly a bunch of helicopters slowly across an entire country and just land. There's supposed to be air defense and radar and all this stuff. And because that had been wiped out both by missiles and by cyber, the Russians had some element of tactical and strategic advantage through those cyber attacks. But, as we saw, they weren't able to capitalize on them, fortunately. So, yeah, like cyber actually did give them possibly their only success of those days.
So basically with the strategic communication, we are Viasat. So every communication aspect outside of the units or between the units is basically broken. So they only have basically local radio. Is this around this lines? Okay.
Right. And if there was a landline from a base to another base, you could phone someone up. But that's, obviously of limited utility because you don't have everyone sitting at base going, okay, we're being invaded. Hang tight and I'll let you know what's going on.
And how did they deal with this? From what I understand, Elon Musk jumped in, or is this something what I got wrong?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. So this is like the quick answer is they switched entirely to Starlink. Elon Musk, like they had a bunch of systems already, not enough. So they were sort of able to do a little bit of a rollout, but then they got a huge number and were able to switch over entirely. But sort of the more important answer is that one of the things that the Ukrainians have become very, very good at doing over like the last 8 years that they've been involved in war with Russia is they've become adaptable in just really amazing ways, right? So if you were to go to like your military and to say, okay, we are going to switch the entire backbone of your communications fabric, like all of it, and we're going to do it after it gets destroyed, and it'll be good to go in 2 days' time, right? Like that would be an amazing feat. Like that would be seriously impressive that, it gets taken down on a Friday and by a Monday it's running again. But that's what happened. Like they are very, very good at just adapting. Like, oh, okay, that doesn't work anymore. We will use this now. And they do, similarly when, the sort of like all the email systems got taken out and all the government's ministries were sort of unable to talk to each other and like, oh no, it's going to go like all hectic. They moved to Telegram, they moved to Signal, they moved to, they use their phones. It's just something that they're able to do after this much time. They've learned that, you can't really trust the computers to be there when you need them. So, we will flow with the next thing that's available. And yeah, like Elon Musk came in, he saved them, but really it's their ability to do that migration that allowed them to switch that saved them. Yeah, his was just like the hardware that made it possible, but they were really like amazing in their ability to just adapt.
In what way is this system now more secure or safer than Viasat, or is it just that the Russians don't have any have prepared so long for the decapitation strike,
right,
that they basically don't have the resources? How can we see that?
So it's probably a bit of both. So one of the things about cyber operations is they actually take, like they're very quick when they execute, but it's all of the lead time. So it's just like blowing up a bridge, like the actual explosion for blowing up the bridge is very quick, but like going out, laying all the explosives and all the lines and stuff like that, that takes time. Same thing with cyber, you need to do a lot of research. You need to, access something, reverse engineer it. That might take months. There's a lot involved, and they don't necessarily have something prepared when Starlink was deployed. That might have been a completely new thing to them. But there's also a geopolitical aspect in that hacking Viasat that's mostly used by Ukraine with a little bit by Germany and France. It's like it's not a huge deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's it's sort of like within the realm of things Russia can do and get away with. Hacking Elon Musk in the US and fucking around with like a super rich person who can make a really loud noise, like that's different, right? Like that's going to be the political blowback from that is going to be larger. So that's part of the protection they have. Also, part of my understanding of it is that the like the Starlink guys are sort of more modern in a way. Like it's newer. They've got better stuff. They have less legacy equipment lying around. They've been able to design their own stuff, so they're not using just random whatever from China sort of things that is full of holes. They're able to use their own stuff. They're able to like there's a lot of discussion about the security that they're running is like quite impressive, and that they're very active and monitoring what's going on. So I think it's sort of a combination of things. Is they weren't prepared. They don't really have the resources to prepare because they're in a war, and they can't go after a U.S. company. And if they do, it's better protected. So that said, I guarantee you Starlink is going to get hacked tomorrow now that I've built it up so much.
I will try to time the release of the video properly.
Do it beforehand. That's all I ask. Hang on. Let me record another bit, which is why we've seen the recent Starlink hack comes as such a surprise. There you go. I'm covered.
So now the other question would be how can I understand the air defense system? So I mean, we saw some manpads used against the helicopters. Of course, they are not really integrated, and I assume there were S-300s or some other systems. So you have a larger system with radars and everything. And
right. So I mean, like an integrated system is sensors, like command centers, missiles that actually do the attack stuff that have different ranges. And from the command center, it would sort of bring in all of this radar stuff, match, okay, this is flying at, a speed that means it's a plane in an area that none of our assets are. It must be the enemy. And at this range, this is the best asset to use against it. So I will now inform that battery to, target this thing and go after it. The idea with the taking that stuff out, so there was like missile attacks against the sensors, against the locations of the missiles, and against the air command systems, or like the integrated command centers. Similarly, the attacks with the cyber stuff was against the computers. Now, it hasn't, like, part of the difficulty is it hasn't really been public. There's been only very vague statements. And so we're waiting for the end of the war to find out like all the good stuff. But my understanding is that the command centers, to some degree, this stuff was wiped. I don't know if that actually happened or if it was somewhere else on the chain of that, but they were targeted somehow.
So do you know how the Ukrainians dealt with this attack on the air defense system?
So most of the air defense system was just down for a while, from what I understand. That to a degree, they were saved by the fact that they'd relocated things so that when it got when a known site was hit by missiles, it was a month out of date. So a lot of places were empty or abandoned by the time they got attacked. With the computers, one of the things that the Ukrainians are incredibly good at is, as you know, there's been this war on for the last 8 years. Since 2014, the Russians constantly do cyber attacks of one sort or another against the Ukrainians. And it's gotten to a point now where it's just sort of like it's a Tuesday, like it's just part of your regular life. Oh, the Russians have wiped everything. Okay, we'll reinstall and come back in an hour. So the Ukrainians have actually, it's not that they're really good at stopping the Russians getting in. It's that they're really good at cleaning up as soon as the Russians are gone. And that is possibly more useful because it's very, very hard to stop people getting in. Like hacking, it's the sort of thing that is strategically advantaged towards the offense. It's a lot easier to get in than to defend. But if you can recover really rapidly and you set your systems up so that just being compromised is not the end of the world, then you can, keep going. And that's a lot of what Ukrainians have done, is that they have learned, don't trust computers when, the chips are down. That when we get hacked, we recover very quickly, and so they're able to do this stuff and just get back up and keep going. And again, like that's very impressive compared to a lot of other countries that don't have 8 years of constant cyber war experience with Russia.
So basically, they're excellent in damage control.
Very much, yeah.
It's quite interesting to probably add here that I think it happened in Germany that Ukrainian refugees got there, and the Ukraine government said don't put them in German schools, and they have a complete e-learning platform and everything else. The materials are all working and something, and I think on Twitter it was something along those lines a few months ago. Yeah, Ukraine is in a war and can do in 2 days or 2 weeks what Germany didn't achieve in 2 years or something. And so they are really flexible and good in improvising and getting stuff to work.
Absolutely. So one of the things that happened is, after the government got wiped, Microsoft offered to move everything into the cloud, into Azure, and that's been done. Like the entire, like all of the government systems that run Ukraine are now in data centers in Europe running on Azure cloud. And that's, again, like if you take a regular country and you say, hey, we're going to migrate to like secure cloud, also you're going to fight a war. Also, there's a brain drain as like most of your, huge quantities of your people are trying to get out of the country and you're being shelled, you know, let's do it in a month. Like that's what they've done. It's just, when you look at it, it's amazing. It's understandable given the pressures that they're under, that they have to come through and do the stuff. But it's still really impressive to think that like an entire country moved their government into a data center run by Microsoft in a few weeks, just because like that was the thing they had to do. So they did it.
Thank you very much for the information.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.